fully understand the complexities of the Enlightenment, we must first begin with its birthplace, Europe. Europe during the time of the 17th and 18th century was a place of turmoil. The oppressive governments gave rise to many enlightened thinkers who sought to improve the living condition through their revolutionary ideas, and to rid of these oppressive governments. Thus this begs the question, to what extent have Enlightenment ideals been fulfilled in the modern era? And to answer that, we will be observing how history and what is occurring presently is proving that the Enlightenment ideals have not been fulfilled. This is evident due to the increase in attempted genocides upon target groups, the lack of initiative taken against genocide, society's ignorance and hypocrisy towards these atrocities. When on the topic of genocide, many overlook the brutal Armenian genocide and don't factor it into their discussion. This is primarily due to the cover-up of the genocide itself. Turkey's Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan has denied the genocide ever occurring multiple times, even doing so in front of other countries at the G20 summit, and in one case he even confronted the Armenian diaspora to come up with evidence of the genocide itself. Turkey isn't the only country that denies it. The US, France, and many other powerful nations don't recognize it as legitimate. In 2012, France's president attempted to make a law stating that it was illegal to deny the Armenian genocide. Unfortunately, the law was turned down for being unconstitutional by the French parliament. Out of fear of worsening the relationship with Turkey, many countries haven't recognized the genocide as being real, and that is why Turkey hasn't had to pay any reparation costs. Powerful nations not recognizing a genocide that history has proven to have occurred contradicts one of the core ideologies of the Enlightenment, of the importance of reason. These countries have chosen politics over what is morally right to do. In preparation for the invasion of Poland, Hitler stated to his commanding generals at Oebelsberg, "Who after all speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" The murder of over 1 million Armenians by the Ottomans was a significant link in the chain of massive violence that the Nazis would later partake in. One of Adolf Hitler's biggest inspirations for the Holocaust, as shown by the quote prior, was indeed the Armenian genocide, with the main reason being that he believed he could get away with doing it just as they had, and that the forces of denial would effectively mask the Holocaust from ever having occurred. It's important to note that Adolf compliments the Americans in his autobiographical book Mein Kampf, which translates to My Struggle in English. In Mein Kampf, Hitler praises America as the one state that has made progress toward a primarily racial conception of citizenship, by excluding certain races from naturalization. To this he was referring to the Jim Crow laws, something that he and his Nazi party applied initially to the Jews in the early stage of their ethnic cleansing. As a preventative measure to genocide, the United Nations created international laws during their Genocide Convention in 1948 in response to the horrors of the Holocaust. Many powerful countries were present during the meeting and signed that they would not permit or contribute to genocide and would aid in stopping it. Article 4 and Article 3 of the Genocide Prevention and Punishment Convention punish any government, individual, or group if they attempt, commit, or plan the act of genocide. One would think that by creating these international laws, genocide would be curtailed or perhaps even cease to occur. But instead, more attempted genocides have occurred since 1948, with the United Nations and other countries having minimal impact in preventing them, and even playing a role in them. The idea that genocide will never happen again has been reiterated so much to the point where it's lost all meaning. It is clearly never going to come to fruition until the proper action is taken by the UN and nations around the world. The fact is that since World War II and the 1948 Genocide Convention, many more genocides have occurred, without the UN doing anything. The Darfur, the Rwandan, the Tibetan, and the Rohingya genocide are all but to just name a few that have occurred since 1948. Which leads me to my second point, that there has been a lack of initiative taken against genocide. To start off, we will be discussing the Rwandan genocide because of its pertinence in modern society and how impactful it was. The Rwandan genocide resulted in over 800,000 deaths over the course of 100 days, something unheard of since the Holocaust. The United Nations acted upon the Rwandan genocide and put over 2,000 peacekeepers in the country. The peacekeepers didn't make much of a difference in the country, but the United Nations faced harsher criticism for not allowing investigations into the assassination of Juvenal Habyarimana, whose death sparked the entire conflict. The United States, one of the nations that is charged with peacekeeping, did little to nothing in the country as well. A key role in the Rwandan genocide were tried and found guilty. Hundreds of thousands were never tried and were simply left to reconcile with the victim. The United Nations intercepted the plane while in Rwanda, finding that it was from France and that it was supplying the Hutu rebel army with arms to contribute to their genocide. And although the French government themselves did not commit the act, they would have known if a company inside their own country was sending weapons to another country. There is also that the United States and France vetoed the UN intervention at the conference. There's also that the United States and France vetoed UN intervention at the conference. There's also that the United States and France vetoed the UN intervention at the United Nations Security Council when discussing what to do. Hutu extremists were all over Rwanda's radio, calling for the extermination of every Tutsi in the country. Thousands were dying daily, and yet the council was not allowed to use the word genocide. There's also speculation that the United States and France knew that the genocide was going to happen and still chose to do nothing before it would occur. People are capable of ruling themselves. That was one of the core ideas of the Enlightenment. France and the United States showed that people cannot trust their own governments if they're doing things like this. And frankly, if someone like this... the real one. There you go. If someone like this is able to do more for his country than two of the strongest militaries in the world, it goes to show how far we've fallen. Frankly, France and the United States, two countries that pride themselves on helping others, did nothing in this conflict. Which finally brings me to my third and final point: society's ignorance and hypocrisy towards genocide. There's been a trend in the 21st century of countries that are strong bullying those who are weak. In China, for example, the government has been forcing the Uyghurs, Muslims, to go into concentration camps and renounce their religion. Like the Uyghurs, the Rohingyas are also being kicked out for their religion. It was John Locke that said religion and politics should be separated, and that one's method of worship should be a private matter. This has obviously not been occurring in the modern world. Secularism is nearly non-existent in these type of countries. This news about the Uyghurs has been kept hidden by China. No one knows about the concentration camps and where their whereabouts are, but many victims are coming out and saying that they do exist. This isn't the first time that China has done something like this. They've been killing hundreds of thousands of Tibetans in the southwestern part of China and have been forcing them to convert. Something similar in India is occurring as well. Many Muslims have been killed by mobs, and Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, is encouraging that type of behavior. We've been gradually diminishing our connection to the Enlightenment and its ideals since 1900s. Many countries have been killing their own people in order to establish their government and to enforce their policies, something that is completely against Enlightenment ideals. Because the media also has such a profound effect on the way people think, no one is able to make actual thoughts for themselves. The end of genocide can only occur if people gather together in union and go against their oppressive governments. Governments should not be allowed to do this, and people need to realize that they are the ones that are in control. Statistics have shown that 69% of Americans think the US should prevent or stop genocide or mass atrocities from occurring in another part of the world. Another statistic has shown that 94% of Americans believe genocide is still very much considered and could occur today. The statistics show the ignorance of the American people. What they don't realize is that genocide is occurring today. And that the only way it can be stopped is that if they gather together and make the change necessary to help defeat the governments that are doing this to their people. Thus, this brings me to my conclusion, that the global efforts made to prevent current and future genocide show that the Enlightenment has not been fulfilled, and the ignorance of the modern world has prevented what it means to be truly